All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining another JINSA webinar. I'm Blaise Mishtal, JINSA's Vice President for Policy. I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by Major General Yaakov Amidror, JINSA Distinguished Fellow and former National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Major General Yaacov Ayish, the Julian and Jenny Josephson Distinguished Fellow at JINSA and former IDF Director of Operations and Defense Attaché here in Washington. Good evening to you both, generals. It's only been a couple of days since I saw you in Israel, where we were with our generals and admirals delegation for a week of high-level meetings. And one of the things that struck me was that in almost all of those meetings that our IDF interlocutors would mention how long Israel has been at war. I think at the time they're saying 992 days, 993 days. And when I went in and did the math, I realized that in fact, this weekend, where here in the United States we'll be celebrating our 250th years of anniversary of independence, is going to be a much more somber occasion in Israel. And Friday, tomorrow, marks 1,000 days since October 7th. And so I thought that was a useful milestone for us to reflect on. I guess my first question, maybe to you, General Amidror, is 1,000 days a long time since October 7th, or is it a blink of an eye? Where is October 7th in Israeli public consciousness? Is it still recent, or has it been consigned to the past?
No, it's a very long time in Israeli terms. Remember that unlike America, it's a compulsory service, and the number of Israelis serving in the army, and the regular army and reserve forces together is huge relative to the number of citizens of Israel. It's very hard to find a family in Israel without at least one of the family serving, and in many cases you can see a mother who has her husband in the army, two children, and one grandchildren, and so on and so forth. So the war is within the Israeli society, and 1,000 days is long, very long time. There are many serving reserve soldiers who serve during this 1,000 days, between 300 and 500 days, half of the time, civilians who are serving in the army, not mentioning the regular army, which is almost all these days in a war, either it is in Gaza or in Lebanon or in the West Bank. And the Air Force is going from all these fronts into Yaman, which is 2,000 kilometers away, and Tehran, which is 1,500 kilometers away. So the Israeli society is in a war, in spite the fact that if you look at the numbers of the economy and so on and so forth, the economy is relatively in a good shape. The Israeli share market is very high, and so on and so forth. But within the society, we feel it in every corner, because every family has at least one member who is of the family who is serving somewhere in one of those fronts that I mentioned. So it's a long time. Within the society, it's many people feel it, but there is two significant numbers that should be mentioned. One is what's happening with the new generation. 1,000 days, it's at least more than three graduates of the high school served in the army as new soldiers. Again, thanks to the compulsory service. what is the number of young people who are volunteering to serve in the fighting units? And the numbers are very, very high, more than before the war. So during the war, maybe because of the war, the readiness of the young generation to volunteer to fighting units is higher than before. And the second poll is even more interesting, is about the number or the percentage of the soldiers who are coming to service when they are called as part of reserve units. At the beginning of the war, it was 120%. Old veterans of the units came back and say, "You are not going to fight without us." Now it is not reaching 100%. But after 3 years, it is around 75 to 80%. So it's two poles which do not exist in other countries, and it gives you kind of a feeling about the resilience of the society, about the reserve forces, which are more mature people, some of them 35, 40, and the pole within the young generation, which is even brighter than that. It is about the number of people who are ready to volunteer to the fighting units. It's over 100%. For every slot which you have to fulfill in the Paratopper Brigade, in Golani Brigade, in the Engineering Corps, in the Armor forces, you have more than what is needed. And I can tell you that we are going now to build two new battalions, one in the Nahal Brigade, now in the Golani Brigade. And this is thanks to the number of volunteers to the fighting units within the young generation. We are building more engineering battalions, which we learn are very needed in the battlefield, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. And the ability to do it is, as I said, it's because the new generation is ready to volunteer. So to your question, yes, it is part of the life, everyday life of the Israeli society. It's a very long time, but up till now, thanks to the clear understanding of the Israelis that there is no real alternative, people are ready to continue to fight because they understand that is the only way to prevent another 7th of October.
So General Ayish, General Amidror just said that Israel and Israelis are still ready to fight. But how would you characterize the current situation that Israel finds itself in? Is 1,000 days after October 7th, is Israel still at war? Has the war ended for now? Is it paused? How would you describe where Israel finds itself right now?
Thank you for having me, Blaise. I'd like to try and to address it from a bit a different angle. You know, a war that started with the October 7th attack, you know, a total intelligence, strategic, operational failure. Immediately after October 7th, Hezbollah expanded the war to the northern front. And, you know, just a few months ago, with the strikes on Iran, we killed Khamenei. And you are looking at this war and asking yourself, what is going on here? And I think we should address it from the strategic level. As the Israeli strategy was defined, deterrence was one of the pillars. The second one was early warning. Both of them collapsed in October 7th. The defense posture, that was the third pillar, collapsed as well. And the last element that the Israeli strategy was based on was a decisive win that has to be achieved by the IDF should the other pillars collapsed. And we are still fighting. We are still fighting. On one hand, the system around us that was built by Iran almost totally collapsed. The ring of fire that was built around us in the last 20 years almost shattered. It's not that we are not facing, here and there certain threats, but basically in military terms, Hamas is shattered, is no longer a military threat. And I would dare to say that even Hezbollah with the small capabilities, the 10% capabilities that were left over there, still, I think was broken and shattered in terms of leadership, military capabilities, infrastructure, and the rest can be achieved should the government will instruct the IDF. The minus of all of that has to be finished with Iran in terms of either a very solid, good agreement with one pillar on the nuclear program, the other one on the ballistic missiles, and the third one on the proxies that Iran is orchestrating or trying to orchestrate again around us. Should those will be achieved or finished, I think we will be satisfied that we succeeded to achieve the goals that were defined by the Israeli government. Right now, we are not yet there. I'm not sure that the major means should be military means. It seems to me like more of political means that have to be implemented either during the new arrangements in Gaza or in Lebanon with the Lebanese government or with Iran via the US. And if not, I'm afraid we will have to be back and we'll have to address those threats again. Because the major lessons vis-a-vis strategy is that we cannot live with imminent threats on our borders. We are not going to allow them to rebuild themselves. And we can see in the last almost 3 years that the Israeli government is exercising together with the IDF a new strategy, which is a very decisive one, a preemptive strategy. And this is the major takeaway that I'm taking nowadays from what we have seen in the last 1,000 days.
General Amidror, would be curious of your assessment of the current situation. Do you agree, as General Ayish just laid out, that sort of the major threats have been degraded through military operations, and now the challenges that remain for Israel are more political and diplomatic? General, you're on mute, General Ayish.
First of all, I agree with General Ayish that when it is coming to one of the pillars of the Iranian strategy in the huge project to destroy Israel, the proxies as ring of fire around Israel, what the King Abdullah of Jordan called the Shiite crescent, does not exist anymore. Yes, we are still fighting in Lebanon. Yes, we are still have forces in Gaza, but Hamas is not relevant as a threat. It is relevant to the Palestinians inside Gaza Strip. It is relevant to anyone who will try to rebuild Gaza. He will have to deal with Hamas one way or another. And in Lebanon, you can see the disability of the organization to defend itself. In every square kilometer in Lebanon that we decided that we want to control, we are now controlling with very few casualties. We are destroying infrastructure which was built in the last, 20, 30 years. And Iran, unlike what was the plan to use the proxies to crumble Israel, and when Iran immunity will be kept because they are 1,500 kilometers away, now Iran has to defend the proxies. The other side of the pendulum which the Iranians have in mind, that they will use the proxies. Now the proxies need Iran to to save them, because they will be distracted either by diplomatic means or by the IDF. Something about the connection between military and diplomacy. I was blamed in one of the newspapers in Israel that I preached to understand that in the modern situation now, the international community, Israel, and so on and so forth, in these circumstances, the old notion that at the end of the war, diplomatic means will be the tool to achieve the goal are not relevant anymore, and the success will be determined by the success or the failure of the military forces. Whenever they succeed, the line that they will achieve, that will be basically will bring the results of this war and not negotiations. Of course, there are areas in which it might go in a different way. If, for example, the Lebanese army will do what is needed because the Lebanese government will be determined, because they will be convinced by the Americans and understand that this is the only way to save Lebanon. Here, the diplomatic tool will be kind of the extension of the military one, and they will achieve the goal. What are the chances that that will happen? Probably very, very low. And if I have to put my money to bet, I think that at the end of the day, it will be done more by the Israeli forces than by the government of Lebanon and diplomatic means. So I think that Aish is right about the fact that we might find some areas in which the diplomatic tools will do the job. I think that we have to be very connected to the reality in the Middle East, in which I don't see who will convince Hamas to disarm itself, or the Lebanese army to disarm Hezbollah. The IDF will have to push in both places. And at the end, the military achievement will be what will be achieved. I remember the decision of the United Nations 1701 after the second Lebanese war. No one remember what is in, what was not there. The United Nations forces came like, kind of savior. They didn't make any good, not to the Lebanese and not for us, maybe for Hezbollah. So I'm very pessimistic about the ability of the diplomatic means to achieve something, but at the same time, we have to give the Americans the chance. They said that they will bring the Lebanese army to disarm Hezbollah. We should help them as much as we can, including agreement in which we will have to move our forces to retreat from some areas. We should give the Americans all the chances in Iran, in Gaza, and in Lebanon. Even at the end of the day, it will be clear that nothing was achieved. Israel will be in a better position to use its force, and the United Nations will be more ready to support Israel because they see that no alternative is a real alternative to save the problems here. So I think that if you ask me to assess, the achievements probably will be done by the military forces. What should we do? It's to give the Americans all the chances to make it by diplomacy.
So, General Amidror, just staying with you for a second, reading between the lines of what you said, do I understand correctly that Israel has been at war for a long time already, 1,000 days, but you don't foresee it withdrawing from all the yellow lines that it has established in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, where its troops are forward deployed? You don't see it pulling back from those yellow lines anytime soon, even if there's not going to be fighting, that military presence is going to remain.
it's part of the diplomatic tools. If you want to achieve something diplomatically, you need these forces to remain where they are, because this is the only way to put pressure on the Lebanese government and Hezbollah. If you don't do it, you lose the leverage that you have, and without a leverage, just to think that you can convince these extreme guys to be more flexible, I think it's a naivety that should not be part of our um, dialogue. We should understand that naivety is not a good beginning in the Middle East. You know, the question is, what the difference between pessimist and optimist in the Middle East? And the answer is that a pessimist is optimist with a lot of experience.
I'd like
General
to add on
Ayish,
that
go ahead. Yeah,
matter
please.
about the yellow lines. I think there is another element that I'd like to add to what General Amidror just said. The presence along the yellow lines in Lebanon, in Gaza, and to some extent also in Syria. The buffer zones that were created should be kept until the threat will be removed, either by an agreement or by other means. It means that it's not only a matter of leverage, it's a matter of allowing the residents of the north, the south, and the Golan Heights to be back to their houses and to leave their families. And I'd like to say another point. General Amidror have mentioned rightly the resilience of the military, the Israeli public. You know, as someone who volunteered for more than 6 months in the Reconstruction Administration at the South to build the villages and the city of Sderot, the situation right now along those villages, kibbutzim and the city of Sderot, is that the population in most of the villages is growing rapidly, and it's about to double itself in a matter of a decade. Right now, in most kibbutzim and villages and the city of Sderot, the number is higher than it was in October 6th. So in terms of resilience, I think it's very, very deep in the Israeli society. And I think what the government is doing rightly in the South is a very good example. I'm not sure I can quote and say the same about the North. But when you are having the right tools, you can see that although we are in a war, a very long war, 1,000 days, the resilience of the public is impressive. And to some extent, I think it's unbelievable.
Sticking with that theme of resilience, General Ayish, I wonder if you could look not at Israeli society, but at the military. What is the ability of the military to sustain this forward posture that it has, the much greater tempo of call-up of reservists? On the one hand, General Amidror said that this has been a long time to be fighting for the IDF, but on the other hand, Israeli society seems continued to be ready to serve. But is this sustainable for the IDF for the long term?
Well, it's not a secret that I was the head of the operation directorate, and in such a job, you are really responsible on the force design and more than that, how this force is activated end to end within the IDF. And I must admit that what we have planned back in the past was not for such a long war. Having said that, when I'm speaking about the ability to adapt, to learn, to implement, to transform, I think what the IDF did is pretty remarkable. And Admiral Fox and myself wrote about it, a paper at the Disappear magazine, which I invite everyone to read, how this transformation helped us during the war, not to wait until the end of the war, and then to study the lessons, and then to have a plan to implement them, but to do it during wartime. And to your question, I think this is exactly what the IDF is doing. It's really a challenge. It's not only the regular standing military forces. It's the reserves that are playing here a significant role with a severe impact on the Israeli economy. And that's why you can see that there is an internal serious debate to what extent the service has to be prolonged and the ultra-Orthodox Israelis, Jews, have to join and do their part in terms of either national service or military service or some other solutions. But to your question, there is no question. There is no alternative. And that's why we will do whatever is needed. It's everyone. Doesn't matter what age. And General Amidror mentioned when platoons and companies and battalions were called, the old generation that was released came too. No one called them, but they were there to help, to assist, to bring their shoulder under the stretcher. And this is the resilience that we are talking about. It's a matter of, national need and necessity that is embedded very deep in the Israeli society.
And General Ayish, you just talked about at the beginning of your response there about how the IDF has had to transform itself while in contact with the enemy. Can you talk about some of those transformations and how the IDF has tried to restructure and apply the lessons from October 7th?
Yes. I will invite everyone to read Eli David's paper that is about to be published by JINSA very soon about the subterranean warfare. I think the strongest example is that we plan to fight the subterranean warfare with mainly technological capabilities, robots, etc., and not to go into those tunnels, and ended clearing up above ground and under the ground. And I'll remind our listeners and participants how many times we spoke about clearing up above ground and under the ground. And that's exactly what we did. We developed the tactics, we developed the technology, we developed the doctrine, we trained the units on it, and we implemented and still implementing it, as we did, by the way, last week when we traveled together under the ground into one of these tunnels with our admirals and generals inside Gaza, right on the yellow line. So this is one example. You can see some other examples, as we did with the way we were fighting in build-up areas. When you are doing a comparison between where we implemented it in Rafah or in Khan Yunis, it's a different tactics, different doctrine. That's what we did and still doing in terms of drones. And I have many more examples. And you have nowadays to transform very, very fast. Otherwise, take a look what is going on in the war between Russia and Ukraine, and you will see the results. Without adaptations, it won't work.
Thank you, General Ayish. Let me ask the audience that we do want to make sure that we get to your questions. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask Generals Ayish or Amidror, please feel free to submit those questions using the Q&A function in Zoom, and I'll be happy to read them out. But first, General Amidror, let me ask you maybe what surprised you the most in the course of the last 1,000 days since October 7th?
I think that the level of readiness of the Ring of Fire was the most surprising fact from my point of view. But remember, when the war was beginning, I was a few years out of the system, so I don't know what surprised the people inside the system. I was surprised by the level of readiness, which is a very high readiness of both Hamas and Hezbollah, relating to the subterranean capabilities and the facilities that they prepared, from which they prepared because they wanted to launch the the attack from within those facilities, mainly in Lebanon. That was the main surprise for me during the 2000. I was not surprised, not by the Iranians' capabilities, not by the ability of Israel to reach the targets in Iran, not even by the very accurate intelligence that we had in both Iran and Lebanon. I know that this is somewhere around where it was. I was not surprised by that. The level of readiness of those two elements of the Ring of Fire was the surprise for me.
Given that, were you also surprised that Hezbollah did not join in on October 7th, or there wasn't greater activity from the West Bank?
No, I think that was the biggest surprise of Sinwar. I thought that the Arab Israelis and the Palestinians will be very, very careful, because in time of a war, they understand that many constraints that we took upon ourselves are not relevant, and this is why they understood that they should not join. I think that Hezbollah, that was probably the biggest mistake of Nasrallah, and it's not a question of surprise. It was what will be the advice of the Iranians, and if there isn't a surprise, it's the Iranians didn't push Hezbollah into the war. On the contrary, but if you understand what they wanted Hezbollah to be for Iran, you can understand why they had been very cautious.
General Ayish, how about you?
Well, I have a lot of surprises in this war, but I'd like to point three elements. The first one is, we had, and I think to some extent we still have, a very exquisite intelligence, very good intelligence. What I have learned, and I think the whole system have learned, that it's not enough to have it. It doesn't mean, even if you have a very good, intimate intelligence, that you are doing the right assessment. So this is one major flag that I'd like to raise. The second one, I think, to some extent, Iran took the role of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah was playing the role of Iran. Instead of Iran activating Hezbollah as they planned, built, paid, trained for 20 years, what they did was a colossal mistake. They started a direct war with Israel. Now, there are many explanations why, and I think they lost a very important train, which was the second train that Nasrallah have missed in this war. And I think the credit has to be given to the leaders at the IDF and at the political level that exploited that opportunity to create the corridor that led later on to Iran from Lebanon, Syria, and so on. But to some extent, for so many years, they built that ring of fire to avoid fighting with us directly. They were doing it via proxies. And in one moment, they decided to break this principle and to try and to attack us. And I think it led to what we have seen in the last year specifically, which led to the degradation of their capabilities on one hand, and to almost the end of Hezbollah almost. We have to be very humble here. There is still 10% that has to be dealt with. But this is the second element. And the last point is a global point. I think the fact that at the beginning, Bab el-Mandab became a very significant element by the Houthis, and then Hormuz Straits by the Iranians, and the war become global, and the economic impact on 20% of the global flow, just because of the war that started in October 7th, becomes such an element with so many implications, was also a surprise to me. I thought it would be contained. I thought it would be avoided. And should it be erupted, I expected it to be distinguished very fast, and it wasn't.
Thank you. Let me turn to some of the questions we got. One from Al Monitor is for you, General Amidror, and asks whether you consider the reports credible that Israel and the United States were planning to support Iranian Kurdish groups, but that the plan was canceled by President Trump following a phone call with Turkish President Erdogan.
I don't know how far the Americans and Israel went with the Kurds towards having them the element which will ignite Iran. I was very pessimistic about the ability of the Kurds to do it. And I think that the fact that the Americans are giving Turkey such an important position in the Middle East is a huge mistake. That the Middle East will suffer from it in the future because the Turks' dreams about renewing the Ottoman Empire and their attitude towards Greece and Cyprus are promising that the broadening the conflict in the Middle East to another area. And I think that this is a big it's a big problem from the Israeli point of view and from many leaders in the Middle East point of view. But I don't know how strong was the commitment of the Kurds and what were their capabilities to do what was, according to the media, was expected from them.
Thank you. General Ayish, a question for you from Elliot Abrams. You mentioned the need for the ultra-Orthodox to join the military or perform alternative national service. What forms of their national service would actually reduce the burdens on the IDF? If they help in hospitals, for example, doesn't reduce the burden on IDF combat soldiers?
Well, there are many options that they can relieve the burden, and there are many organizations that can be created, with the right conditions that will be provided for them. When I'm thinking about the logistics, the intelligence, the maintenance, and so many other areas that they can cover, obviously they can relieve the burden. When I'm thinking about fire brigade, when I'm thinking about medical support, when I'm thinking about hospitals, instead of having soldiers over there in wartime or the home front command, obviously they can do it. But the solution is less complicated than people tend to think. I think we should agree on the principle, and the rest can be tailored. And I'm saying it as someone who was the chief of staff of the ground forces for 3 years, and force buildup was my business. It is something doable. We should decide on doing it. Take as an example the Hashmonaim Brigade that was built lately. It's a great success. It started with 1 battalion, and today we have already a brigade. Take a look at the implementation in the Israeli Air Force in terms of intelligence. Take a look at what they did with the ultra-Orthodox in terms of maintenance. Teaching them a profession, providing them a respectful environment and income and job where they can do their work on one hand and they can study on the other hand. It is something that I'm saying it as a yeshiva student until the age of 14. It's doable. It's only a matter of decision. And it seems to me like within the IDF, the climate and the will is there. And it's only about, an internal society decision that has to be taken by the different sides. And I'm not talking about the extremists. When you are talking about the extremists, always there a challenge. But the majority, it's doable.
Thank you. Maybe we can finish on an easy question from John Hanna. At a strategic level, the war's impact on the U.S.-Israel relationship and Israel's standing in America has been huge, and for the most part, not in a good way. People are still trying to understand the long-term implications, but can you discuss how this trend is becoming incorporated, if at all, in Israeli decision-making about its war strategy going forward? General Amidror, maybe we can start with you.
I think that the question should be asked by Americans to Americans, because it is something that it's happening in America and should be dealt, most of it in America. But I think in Israel, people understand, more people understand that we will have to deal with a different America in the future. And this is why we are giving up the idea which was with us so many years, that we are getting from the Americans every year $4 billion. Probably it's the end of this project. The second one is the dependency of Israel in America relating to spare parts, munition, and so on and so forth. Israel will be more independent, but I don't see any substitute to the F-35, F-15, F-16, Apache, and so on and so forth, that probably very high probability will be continued to be manufactured by the Americans and bought by the Israelis. So the whole issue of independence is very should be defined. What kind of independence, in which areas, and everyone in Israel knows that if America declare wars in Israel, Israel probably will lose. So the question is how far the Americans will change their attitude towards Israel. As an old guy, I still remember that I fought in the Six-Day War without having even one American weapon system. From my FN in my hands to the aeroplanes above in the air, the Mirage. So it very much depends what will happen in America. It's less depends what will happen in Israel. We understand that we will have to adopt and to mitigate those changes in America. Some of them can be done. Some of these mitigations, I think it's a dream. Israel, for example, Israel will never be totally independent. It's impossible. But we can be in some areas less dependent and other issues that we have to change. But we have to remember all the time to be very humble. There is no substitute to the special relations between Israel and the United States of America from the Israeli point of view.
Blaise, I'd like to add on that with your permission.
Please, General Ayish.
I think the relations will have to transform, and I'm saying it when I'm looking at the region, I see opportunities here. I think when I'm listening to the president saying Israel is a model ally, it means that this model can be expanded. And I think building here in the region the right architecture with the right partners, headed by the US via the tool of CENTCOM. CENTCOM, the same idea that JINSA came with in 2018, that was implemented since 2021 and proven itself time and time again in the last 3 years, can help us all to build a regional architecture that in terms of intelligence, space, technology, and the will to defend ourselves by ourselves will be a key role. And I think at the end, by going to that direction, leading to that transformation, it won't be only moving from an MOU to a partnership. It will be an implementation, the philosophy behind it. And I think it's doable.
Great. Well, thank you both, General Amidror, General Ayish. Thank you for your time. this evening. Thank you to everyone in the audience for tuning in.
Thank you.
Please be sure to check out jinsa.org for all of our latest analyses, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Blaise.
evening.
תודה, עמידרור. להתראות.
Good evening, Litrot.
Good night.